In places where Ukrainian Mavics, the eyes of Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance, cannot reach due to their technical limitations, the Russian occupiers are aware of this. The Russians feel free and even safe in such areas, attempting to evacuate a damaged Grad multiple launch rocket system, even in broad daylight. But another long-range drone, Krilo, prevents them from going unnoticed. And while the Russians are struggling to hook up the equipment for towing, a Ukrainian kamikaze drone, a Magyar bird, is already flying in to intercept. The Russians have already secured a strong tow and are pulling away the multiple launch rocket system, which in a day or two would again be shelling Ukrainian positions. The Ukrainian drone pilot selects a trajectory and at full speed crashes into the towing vehicle. The driver sees it coming and starts turning the wheel, but it doesn't change the outcome. They overturn. Reconnaissance shows that the towing vehicle is on fire, but the multiple launch rocket system still needs to be destroyed. Without wasting any time, the kamikaze drone pilots precisely strike and eliminate it. Reconnaissance confirms that the target has been completely destroyed, and it's time to search for the next enemy vehicle for total elimination. Meanwhile, Russian soldiers delivered a combat load, so-called kabanchiki, in English piglets for a mortar, using a Bukanka convertible. They quickly unload it, but the eyes of the Magyar birds see everything. Those kabanchiki must not be allowed to fly toward Ukrainian infantry. Here, they are naively stacking them under a bush, planning to begin shelling in half an hour. Well then, a powerful fire show is about to begin. The drone pilots thank the Mavic for the accurate target designation and begin their mission. On the front line, the Mavic's eyes and the kamikaze drone's sting work as one. The FPV drone's camera could never spot what the reconnaissance pilots and spotters see from above with the Mavic. Now, the kamikaze drone has reached the enemy munitions and is about to trigger a powerful explosion. Just like that, the Russian mortar crew's plans were turned into ash and flames in a matter of seconds. The Russian armored personnel carrier is also on its way somewhere. If the reconnaissance drone has spotted it, it's not going anywhere. While the enemy armored personnel carrier is parked in a building, a fiber optic kamikaze drone pilot is already flying to dispose of it. It is very easy to distinguish between a regular drone and a fiber optic drone. The picture is clear, without any interference. The pilot carefully and slowly approaches the armored personnel carrier, examining its weakest points. Spotting an open hatch, he slams into it at full speed, causing a powerful detonation. The reconnaissance drone transmits footage showing everything engulfed in flames, a clear confirmation that no second strike is needed. Another enemy armored personnel carrier is rushing through the village for an assault. The Wormbuster pilots are also ready to meet the enemy attack and without wasting any time, fly out for interception. Coming face to face with Ukrainian drone, the Russian armored personnel carrier halts. Although there are no visible signs of combat readiness, the pilots waste no time and deliver additional strikes, destroying the enemy armored personnel carrier. The Russian soldiers fled, forgetting to close the hatch behind them, but bomber drones were already launched after them, although I won't be showing that in this episode. This is what the drone strike looked like from the outside. After such an impact, the armored personnel carrier turned into a burning chunk of metal, clearly no longer fit for any military assaults. The reconnaissance drone pilot decides to wait until the fire reaches the ammunition to confirm that the detonation was successful. And the wait wasn't long. The explosion followed very shortly after. With the trees now covered in leaves, locating camouflaged Russian equipment in the forests has become significantly more difficult, but Ukrainian pilots are used to tackling tougher challenges. They scan every meter of the occupied territory, find enemy equipment, and swiftly eliminate it. The first strike damaged the self-propelled artillery system, but didn't destroy it, so another Ukrainian pilot flew in to finish the job. Spotting an open hatch, a quick decision was made to strike directly into it. This led to the complete destruction of the enemy vehicle. The reconnaissance drone spots smoke, but for final confirmation, another FPV drone is sent in, which verifies that the mission was successfully completed. Another Russian armored personnel carrier was abandoned by Russian troops after getting stuck on uneven terrain. Seizing the opportunity, the pilots took aim and delivered a devastating strike. Reconnaissance confirms the success of the strike, which tore off the machine gun turret from the Russian armored personnel carrier. The APC itself was reduced to a useless chunk of scrap metal. Another abandoned Russian armored personnel carrier was spotted in the middle of an open field. The pilots conducted reconnaissance to check for the presence of Russian infantry, but finding none, they made a quick decision to eliminate the enemy vehicle. 2 hits, and the armored personnel carrier is in flames. Here, the nighttime movement of enemy forces didn't end well for them either. By morning, the armored personnel carrier had been successfully destroyed. Here, we see the nighttime destruction of a Russian tank by a bomber drone. The Russians thought they had securely hidden the tank in dense vegetation, but in reality, things turned out quite differently. The third drop was an incendiary one, which burned the tank to the ground. Here's another armored personnel carrier heading into an assault, but an encounter with a drone instantly changes its plans. Kamikaze drone pilots work around the clock, hunting for Russian armored vehicles to ensure the occupiers are left with unforgettable memories. This is the OSA surface-to-air missile system. The Wormbuster pilots tracked it down in a tree line, a nasty piece of equipment. It shoots down flying drones. The pilots carefully approach it and deliver a direct strike. This is the infamous Road of Death, and all that's left of what was once combat equipment here is scrap metal. In the past, the Russians would ride along it in these kinds of makeshift carts. One of them was loaded with several fuel canisters, but the Russians had already fled. So the pilot decided to destroy the extra fuel. The detonation was spectacular. Just like that, the Russians were left without fuel. It was turned into flames and black smoke. This is archival footage from 2 months ago, but I decided to include it in this compilation. Here, the Magyar birds caught a Russian tank equipped with a mine roller that was heading into an assault. Through precise strikes and coordinated effort, the Russian tank was destroyed. Another piece of Russian armored equipment was spotted by reconnaissance operators. After receiving the coordinates, the Wormbuster pilots immediately flew out to intercept. These are events from the battlefield that also took place at the beginning of April. Russian tank crews, while crossing an open field, thought they could slip through unnoticed, but their assumptions proved to be wrong. The pilots quickly began engaging and attacking the target. Due to coordinated actions, the Russian tank failed to cross the field and was destroyed. And this is the 110th Brigade. The events took place in Donetsk region on May 17th. Kamikaze drone pilots targeted Russian equipment, attempting to enter a Ukrainian village. The Russians made numerous attempts, but in the end, all their vehicles were ruthlessly incinerated by Ukrainian unmanned forces. Here, we can see the coordinated work of the Heavenly Retribution Battalion of Unmanned Forces, defending Ukrainian territory on the front line in Donetsk region. The Russians were advancing for an assault, but their plans were thwarted by professional Ukrainian kamikaze drone pilots. After a heavy armored vehicle was hit, the Russians were forced to abandon it and flee into a tree line. They had no idea that Ukrainian reconnaissance had been watching them the entire time. But when bomber drones arrived on the battlefield, everything became clear to them. As a result, the tree line was successfully cleared and the equipment destroyed. And here are more Russian infantrymen who were unfortunate enough to come face to face with kamikaze drones. In desperate attempts to bring the drone down, the Russians threw everything they had: rifles, radios, any objects within reach, but all their efforts ended in failure. This Russian soldier hoped that a fuel canister would protect him from the drone. It was his last hope. Here's a Russian soldier with a shovel. and this one threw the last thing he had at hand, his hat. This is a group of Russian assault troops who, on their way to the assault, lost their armored personnel carrier after it hit a mine. They had to continue the rest of the journey on foot, but kamikaze drone pilots spotted them before they could reach the tree line. This is a morning assault by Russian stormtroops on quad bikes on May 17th. A reconnaissance drone spotted them in advance, so kamikaze drone pilots were quickly deployed and didn't allow them to even reach the first line of the front. The assault ended before it even began. Here's another Russian motorcycle assault in Donetsk region that took place on May 8th. Ukrainian drone pilots, together with artillery units, quickly engaged the Russians and entered into combat. Frightened, the Russians abandoned their motorcycles and fled into a tree line. But the artillerymen began using cluster munitions. Kamikaze drones destroyed the Russian motorcycles, leaving the enemy with no chance of a successful assault. That's all for now, friends. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest events. This material was prepared by Hustler. See you soon.